A poor girl was walking home from school when she saw an elderly man lying on the ground. She decided to help him. A few days later, her family received a phone call that would change their lives. But before that, consider subscribing to the channel so we can keep sharing amazing stories. Lucy lived in a small, weathered house on the outskirts of a modest American town. The house was old, with peeling paint and creaky wooden floors that whispered stories of better days long gone. Inside, it was sparsely furnished, with a well-worn couch in the living room and a table that wobbled slightly if too much pressure was applied. Yet despite the humble surroundings, the home was filled with warmth, a reflection of the love between Lucy and her mother, Emily. Emily was a woman of quiet strength, working tirelessly as a house cleaner in the wealthier parts of town. She left early each morning, before the sun had fully risen, to ensure that Lucy had what little they could afford. The weight of the world seemed to rest on her slender shoulders, yet she carried it with grace, never letting her hardships dampen the spirit she had worked so hard to instill in her daughter. Lucy, at 12 years old, had inherited her mother's resilience. She was a bright-eyed girl, with long brown hair that she tied back with a simple ribbon each day before school. Her clothes, though always clean, were second-hand, and her shoes were scuffed from the long walk she took to school. Despite this, Lucy never complained. She understood the sacrifices her mother made and was determined to repay her in whatever way she could, even if it was just by excelling in her studies. Every morning, Lucy walked several miles to her school, crossing over a small bridge and through a neighborhood where the houses were much larger, with manicured lawns and shiny cars parked in the driveways. She would pass by these homes, occasionally catching glimpses of families inside, their lives seemingly perfect compared to her own. But Lucy never envied them. Instead, she would imagine a future where she could give her mother a life free from worry, where they could live comfortably without counting every penny. Lucy's school was an old brick building with tall windows that let in the morning light. Inside, the classrooms were filled with the sounds of children laughing, talking, and learning. Lucy was one of the quieter students, often found with her nose buried in a book during recess, or sitting at the front of the class, eagerly absorbing every word the teacher said. Her teachers noticed her dedication and often praised her for her hard work, which only fueled her determination to succeed. At home, Lucy and Emily shared everything. Dinner was a simple affair, usually something Emily had prepared quickly after returning from work. They would sit at their wobbly table, eating and talking about their day. Emily would listen intently as Lucy recounted her lessons, proud of her daughter's achievements, but always cautious to remind her that success wasn't just about grades. It was about kindness, integrity, and the way one treated others. These lessons were the foundation of Lucy's character. She knew they didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough. Their life was challenging, but Lucy faced each day with optimism, her heart filled with the hope that one day things would get better. Until then, she would continue to do her best, for herself and for her mother, who had given her everything despite having so little. Lucy's walk home that afternoon was like any other. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the narrow streets as she made her way back from school. The air was warm, and the occasional breeze stirred the leaves on the trees that lined the road. She was lost in thought, her mind drifting between her lessons and the familiar scenes around her, when something unusual caught her eye. There, just ahead, near the entrance to a small park, she saw a figure on the ground. At first, she thought it might be someone sitting or resting, but as she got closer, the truth became clear. It was an elderly man, his body slumped awkwardly on the sidewalk, as if he had fallen and couldn't get up. His clothes, though neat, were disheveled, and his face was etched with pain and confusion. Lucy's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen anything like this before. Without a second thought, she rushed over to him, her school bag bouncing against her back as she ran. When she reached him, she knelt down beside him, her eyes wide with concern. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked softly, trying to keep her voice steady, despite the worry that gripped her. The man, who appeared to be in his late 70s, opened his eyes slowly as if the effort was too much. He looked at Lucy, his gaze unfocused and tired. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. It was clear he was in no condition to move on his own. Lucy didn't hesitate. She knew she had to help him, but she also knew she couldn't do it alone. She glanced around, hoping to see someone who could assist her, but the street was empty, save for the distant sound of traffic. She turned her attention back to the man. "Can you try to stand?" "I'll help you," she said, her voice filled with determination. The man gave a faint nod, and with a great deal of effort, he attempted to push himself up. Lucy slipped her small hand under his arm and used all her strength to support him. It was a slow and difficult process, but eventually, with Lucy's help, the man was able to get to his feet, though he was still unsteady. Seeing his condition, Lucy knew he couldn't walk far. She looked around again and spotted a bench a short distance away, under the shade of a large oak tree. Gently, she guided the man towards it, moving slowly to keep him balanced. Every step was a struggle, but Lucy didn't waver. She kept talking to him, her words a steady stream of reassurance, hoping to keep him calm and focused. When they finally reached the bench, Lucy helped the man sit down, making sure he was comfortable before taking a step back to catch her breath. Her heart was still racing, but she felt a deep sense of relief. The man was safer now, and she could see that he was already beginning to recover from the shock of his fall. Lucy remained by his side, her thoughts now turning to what she should do next. John sat on the bench, his breath still slightly labored, but his strength slowly returning. He looked at Lucy with a mix of gratitude and disbelief, as if he couldn't quite grasp the kindness of this young girl who had come to his aid. His voice, though weak, carried a deep sincerity as he finally spoke. "Thank you, dear," he said, his voice quivering slightly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Lucy, standing beside him, felt a flush of embarrassment at the praise. She wasn't used to such attention, and didn't think she had done anything out of the ordinary. In her eyes, it was simply the right thing to do. She shrugged modestly, a small shy smile playing on her lips. "It was nothing, sir," she replied softly. "I just wanted to help." But John was not satisfied with such a simple response. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze more focused now, searching her face as if trying to commit every detail to memory. There was a seriousness in his eyes that made Lucy a bit uneasy, though not in a frightening way, more in the way of someone who had just realized the significance of an encounter that, on the surface, seemed random. "What is your name, young lady?" John asked, his tone gentle yet insistent. Lucy hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure why he wanted to know, but there was something in his manner that told her this was important to him. Finally, she answered. "Lucy," she said simply. "My name is Lucy." He seemed to be committing it to memory, along with her face and the events of this day. Lucy noticed the way he was looking at her, and while she still felt a bit shy under his gaze, she didn't pull away. There was something comforting about him, something that made her feel that her act of kindness had truly meant something. Before she could say anything more, John spoke again, his voice filled with emotion. "Lucy, I will never forget what you did for me today, never." His words hung in the air, carrying a weight that Lucy didn't fully understand, but could feel nonetheless. She nodded, unsure of what to say. It wasn't often that someone spoke to her with such seriousness, and it made her realize that maybe this encounter had been more significant than she initially thought. Not wanting to linger on the moment too long, Lucy took a step back, glancing at John with concern one last time. "Are you sure you're all right now, sir?" she asked, her voice full of genuine care. John nodded, a small smile finally breaking through the solemnity on his face. "I am, thanks to you," he replied. Satisfied that John was okay, Lucy gave him one last look of reassurance before she turned to leave. But as she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted, that this simple act of kindness would have a ripple effect far beyond what she could imagine. Emily sat at the small kitchen table, a pile of bills spread out before her. The light filtering through the window cast a soft glow on her tired face as she frowned at the numbers that just didn't add up. She had been trying to stretch every dollar, but the mounting expenses were relentless. The rent was due soon, and there were still groceries to buy, not to mention Lucy's school supplies. She sighed, running a hand through her hair, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on her. As she was lost in thought, there came a knock at the door. It was soft but deliberate, startling Emily from her worries. She wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at this time of day. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but the knock came again, this time a bit more insistent. Emily rose from the table, smoothing her worn dress as she made her way to the door. When she opened it, she was greeted by the sight of an older man standing on her front step. He was neatly dressed, with a dignified air about him. though there was a warmth in his eyes that put her slightly at ease. In his hands, he held something wrapped in brown paper. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the man said politely, removing his hat. "I'm sorry to bother you. My name is John." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the formal introduction. She didn't know this man, or at least she didn't think she did. There was a brief moment of confusion as she tried to place him, but nothing came to mind. "Good afternoon," she replied cautiously. John smiled gently and held out the wrapped package. "I'm here to express my gratitude. A few days ago, your daughter, Lucy, helped me when I was in need. I wanted to thank her, and you for raising such a kind and compassionate young lady." Emily's eyes widened slightly in surprise. She had heard Lucy mention helping an old man, but she hadn't thought much of it at the time. It was just like Lucy to do something like that, and she had been proud of her daughter, but she hadn't expected any follow-up, let alone a visit like this. "That's very kind of you," Emily said, accepting the package. It was heavier than she had expected, and she could feel the contours of a book through the paper. "But really, you didn't have to." John held up a hand, cutting her off gently. "It's the least I could do. This book is a small token of my appreciation. It's an old one, very rare. I thought it might bring some joy, or perhaps be of some value." Emily looked down at the package in her hands, curiosity piqued. She was no expert on books, but she could tell by the way John spoke that this wasn't just any old volume. The weight of it, the careful wrapping, all suggested it was something special. But why would a stranger give her something so valuable? "Thank you," she said, still somewhat bewildered. "This is unexpected." John smiled again, his expression softening. "Please, think nothing of it. I just wanted to show my appreciation. Your daughter did something many would not have, and it touched me deeply." Emily nodded, still trying to process the situation. "I'll make sure to tell Lucy. She'll be so surprised." John inclined his head slightly. "I hope she enjoys it. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." With that, he tipped his hat, and with a final nod he turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing in the doorway, the package clutched in her hands. She watched him go, a mix of gratitude and confusion swirling in her mind. She had no idea what to make of the visit, but something told her that this encounter, like the one Lucy had with the man days earlier, was more significant than it seemed. A few days had passed since John's unexpected visit, and life in the small house had returned to its usual rhythm. The gift of the rare book still sat on the living room table, untouched except for the brief moments when Emily would glance at it, wondering about its true value and the meaning behind such an extraordinary gesture. The air in the house, however, felt different. There was a lingering sense of something unknown, as if the calm before a storm. It was early evening when the phone rang, its sharp sound cutting through the quiet hum of the household. Emily, who was in the kitchen preparing a modest dinner, wiped her hands on a towel and picked up the receiver. The voice on the other end was formal, almost detached, and immediately asked if she was Emily. "Yes, this is she," Emily replied, a hint of caution in her voice. There was a brief pause, a moment of silence that stretched just long enough to make Emily's heart beat a little faster. Then, the voice continued, speaking with a tone that carried both authority and an odd warmth. "Mrs. Emily, I'm calling to inform you that you have been selected as the beneficiary of a significant inheritance." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Inheritance? The word alone was enough to send her mind racing, trying to grasp what this could possibly mean. She felt a wave of disbelief wash over her, as if she had misheard. Or perhaps this was some kind of mistake. But the voice on the other end was calm, methodical, as if they had delivered this kind of news many times before. "Could you repeat that?" The voice obliged, reiterating the same incredible statement. She was to receive a large sum of money as part of an inheritance from a distant relative. The details were to follow, but the amount mentioned was enough to make Emily's knees feel weak. She reached out, steadying herself against the counter as she listened in stunned silence. "This must be a mistake," she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know of any relatives who would leave us such a thing." The voice on the other end reassured her that all the paperwork was in order and that the inheritance was legitimate. They provided a few more details, enough to convince Emily that this was not a prank or a misunderstanding. It was real as the phone she held in her trembling hand. For a moment, Emily couldn't speak. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, disbelief, confusion, hope, and a fear that this was too good to be true. She had spent so many years scraping by, counting every penny, that the idea of suddenly having wealth was almost incomprehensible. Finally, finding her voice, she thanked the caller and asked for the necessary steps to claim the inheritance. The conversation ended with the promise that more information would be sent to her soon, and Emily hung up the phone, still in a daze. She stood there in the kitchen, the phone still in her hand, trying to process what had just happened. It felt as if the ground beneath her had shifted, and she wasn't sure if she should feel exhilarated or terrified. The reality of her situation had been turned on its head, and she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Emily's disbelief lingered in the days following the phone call. The idea that a substantial inheritance could fall into their laps out of nowhere felt like a dream, or perhaps a trick her mind was playing. She started by revisiting the name of the distant relative mentioned in the call, but no one in her family tree matched the description. Emily called the number back, seeking more information, but the answers she received were vague, only deepening her suspicion that something wasn't adding up. The paperwork that followed provided little comfort, only confirming that the inheritance was real, but offering no further explanation of its origins. Puzzled, Emily decided to do some research on her own. She remembered John, the older man Lucy had helped, and whose visit had been so mysterious. Something about his demeanor, his sudden appearance, and the rare book he had given them stuck with her. Could there be a connection? With a little more digging, Emily found out that John was not just any elderly man, but one of the wealthiest individuals in the city. His name appeared in articles about philanthropy, business ventures, and real estate. He was known for his immense wealth, but also for his discretion and privacy. The more Emily read, the more a realization began to dawn on her, a realization that made her heart race. John wasn't a distant relative at all. He was the very man Lucy had helped that day, and he had been so moved by her kindness that he chose to bestow this incredible gift upon them. The inheritance was no accident. It was a deliberate act of gratitude and generosity, a way for John to repay the family for the selfless act of their young daughter. Emily's hands trembled as she pieced it all together. The truth was almost too incredible to believe. A chance encounter, an act of kindness, and now this, an unexpected fortune that could change everything. John's wealth was vast, and the inheritance was substantial enough to alter their lives in ways Emily had never dared to imagine. As the reality of their new circumstances set in, Emily felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, relief, and a deep sense of awe at the chain of events that had led to this moment. She knew that their lives would never be the same again, and all because of Lucy's pure-hearted decision to help a stranger in need. The first weeks after receiving the inheritance felt like a dream to Emily, a dream she was afraid to wake up from. Each day brought new possibilities, and with it, a sense of security that she had never known. The relief was so profound that she often found herself pausing in the middle of daily tasks, overwhelmed by the realization that she no longer had to worry about the next bill or where the money for groceries would come from. The decision to move was not made lightly. Emily had spent years making their old small house a home, despite its flaws. Every creaky floorboard and worn-out corner held memories of laughter, tears, and determination. But now, with the means to do so, Emily knew it was time for a change. She wanted Lucy to have a space that reflected the new chapter in their lives, one that was filled with light, comfort, and the promise of better days. The search for a new house was both exciting and daunting. Emily wanted a place that felt right, a place where they could truly start fresh. They visited several homes, each with its own charm, but none that quite captured the feeling Emily was searching for. Then one afternoon they found it. A charming house nestled on a quiet street, surrounded by tall, leafy trees that rustled softly in the breeze. The house was perfect. It had a spacious front porch with a swing, something Emily had always dreamed of, but never thought she could afford. The garden out front was already blooming with flowers, and Emily could picture Lucy playing there, her laughter filling the air. Inside, the house was bright and airy, with large windows that let in the sunlight, casting a warm glow on the hardwood floors. Each room felt like it was inviting them in, offering them a fresh start. Lucy was particularly taken with the room that would become her own. It was a cozy space, with a large window that overlooked the garden. The walls were painted a soft blue, a color that immediately made Lucy feel calm and happy. Emily watched as her daughter explored the room, her eyes wide with wonder, as if she could hardly believe this was real. Lucy had never had her own room before. She had always shared a small space with Emily, and the idea of having a place all to herself was almost overwhelming. Emily took her time decorating the new house, carefully choosing items that brought warmth and personality to each room. She wanted their new home to feel lived in and loved, not just a house but a sanctuary. She found herself drawn to small, meaningful pieces, like the handmade quilt she placed on Lucy's bed, or the vintage clock that ticked softly in the living room, filling the space with a comforting rhythm. These were the touches that made the house truly theirs, a place where they could create new memories together. But it wasn't just the physical space that transformed. With the financial burden lifted, Emily found herself with the freedom to pursue dreams she had long set aside. She had always loved baking. There was something about the process of creating something from scratch that brought her peace. It was a skill she had honed over the years, making do with whatever ingredients she could afford. Now, with the inheritance, she could finally turn that passion into something more. Opening her own cafe had always been a distant fantasy, something she imagined during late nights when sleep wouldn't come. But now it was within reach. She found a small, cozy space in the heart of town, perfect for the kind of warm, inviting atmosphere she wanted to create. She envisioned a place where people could come to relax, to enjoy a cup of coffee and a slice of homemade pie, and to feel at home. The process of setting up the cafe was both exhilarating and exhausting. Emily poured her heart into every detail, from choosing the furniture to perfecting her recipes. She wanted everything to be just right, a reflection of the love and care she put into her cooking. The cafe, which she named Emily's Hearth, quickly became a favorite spot in the community. Word spread about the delicious food and the welcoming environment, and soon, the cafe was bustling with regular customers who felt more like friends than patrons. Lucy often spent time at the cafe after school, helping her mother with small tasks or doing her homework at one of the corner tables. She loved the way the cafe smelled, like fresh bread, coffee, and something sweet baking in the oven. It was a place where she felt safe and happy, surrounded by the warmth of her mother's love and the community that had embraced them. As the weeks turned into months, Emily and Lucy's lives settled into a new rhythm, one that was filled with comfort, joy, and a sense of security they had never known before. The new house and the cafe were more than just material changes. They were symbols of a life transformed, a life where Emily no longer had to choose between paying a bill or buying groceries, and where Lucy could dream of a future without the shadow of poverty hanging over her. Their bond, already strong, grew even deeper as they navigated this new chapter together. Emily often reflected on how far they had come, marveling at the chain of events that had led them here. She knew that none of this would have been possible without Lucy's act of kindness, and she was filled with a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the inheritance, but for the daughter who had made it all possible. The day Lucy started at her new school marked a significant milestone in her life. It was a prestigious institution, known for its academic excellence and wide range of extracurricular activities, far removed from the modest public school she had attended before. The building itself was impressive, with tall, polished windows and sprawling grounds filled with trees, gardens, and outdoor spaces for students to gather. On that first morning, Lucy felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she walked through the grand entrance. Her new uniform, neatly pressed and perfectly fitted, made her feel both proud and slightly out of place. The school's hallways buzzed with the energy of students, each one seeming to move with purpose, their lives and ambitions stretching out before them like the sunlit corridors they walked through. Emily had chosen this school for Lucy because she wanted her daughter to have every opportunity available, to nurture the talents that had always been there but had gone unrecognized in their previous circumstances. Lucy was an intelligent and creative child, with a love for reading, writing, and art, interests that had been limited by the resources at her old school. Here she would have access to a wealth of programs and opportunities that could help her grow and flourish. Despite the overwhelming newness of it all, Lucy quickly found her footing. She was placed in advanced classes, where her natural curiosity and love for learning were immediately apparent. Her teachers noticed her potential and encouraged her to explore subjects that intrigued her. Whether it was literature, science, or the fine arts, Lucy thrived in this environment where her ideas were valued and her contributions recognized. Yet even as she began to excel academically, Lucy remained the same humble, kind-hearted girl she had always been. The shift in her financial situation had not changed who she was at her core. She made friends easily, not because of her new circumstances, but because of her genuine nature. Her classmates were drawn to her warmth and generosity, qualities that had been nurtured in the years when she had so little to give, but gave freely nonetheless. Lucy's new friends came from diverse backgrounds, and for the first time, she found herself surrounded by peers who shared her interests and dreams. They spent their lunch breaks discussing books, art, and their future aspirations, conversations that Lucy had longed for but hadn't had the chance to experience before. She joined the school's art club, where she discovered a passion for painting, and enrolled in a creative writing course that allowed her to express herself in ways she had never imagined. Despite the noticeable differences in her life, like the new clothes, the spacious home, and the access to resources she had once only dreamed of, Lucy never lost sight of where she came from. She continued to carry with her the lessons her mother had taught her about kindness, gratitude, and the importance of helping others. Lucy knew that her life had changed because of a simple act of kindness, and she was determined to remain true to those values, no matter how much her circumstances improved. As the weeks passed, Lucy settled into her new life at the school, finding a balance between her studies, her new friendships, and the quiet moments she still cherished with her mother. The opportunities before her were vast, and while she embraced them with open arms, she did so with the humility and grace that had always defined her. In this new chapter, Lucy was not just surviving, she was thriving, all because of a chance encounter that had changed the course of her life. John, now fully recovered, had been thinking about Lucy and Emily ever since he learned of how their lives had changed. The memory of that day when Lucy had helped him lingered in his mind, not just because of the kindness she had shown, but because it had sparked something within him, a desire to reconnect with the simple, genuine acts of humanity that wealth and success had sometimes obscured. One afternoon, John decided it was time to visit them, to see for himself how they were doing. He had no grand expectations, only a genuine curiosity and a deep sense of gratitude. He wanted to thank them properly, not just with money or gifts, but with the warmth of friendship and the wisdom of years lived. When John arrived at their new home, he was struck by how welcoming it was, how the house exuded the same warmth and love that had so clearly defined Lucy and Emily's previous life, despite their struggles. As he approached the door, his heart was light, carrying with it a sense of purpose and connection. Emily opened the door with a smile, her face lighting up when she recognized John. There was no need for formalities. She stepped aside, inviting him in with genuine warmth, as though they were old friends. The moment he crossed the threshold, John felt at ease, welcomed into a space that was as comforting as it was new. Lucy was in the living room, a book in her hand, but she quickly put it aside when she saw John enter. Her face broke into a smile, and she rushed to greet him, her youthful energy and sincerity touching his heart. It was a simple reunion, yet filled with an unspoken understanding of the bond that had been formed between them through that fateful encounter. They sat together in the living room, sharing tea and stories. Emily spoke of the cafe she had opened, the pride evident in her voice, as she described how it had become a gathering place for the community. Lucy talked about her new school, her eyes sparkling as she recounted her experiences and the new friends she had made. John listened with rapt attention, genuinely interested in every detail of their lives. As the afternoon wore on, the conversation turned deeper. John began to share some of the lessons life had taught him over the years. He spoke of his successes and failures, of the importance of kindness, humility, and the value of human connection, things that, despite his wealth, he had sometimes overlooked. He looked at Lucy, his eyes softening as he encouraged her to always follow her heart, to let her inner compass guide her in everything she did. "Lucy," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "never forget that the smallest acts of kindness can change the world. You did something extraordinary by simply being yourself, by choosing to help someone in need. That is a gift, a power you hold within you. Don't ever lose that." Lucy listened intently, her young mind absorbing every word. She felt a deep sense of respect for John, not just because of what he had done for her family, but because of the wisdom he imparted. His words resonated with her, reinforcing the values her mother had always taught her, and giving them even greater meaning. As the visit came to an end, John stood to leave, but not before expressing his gratitude once more. The bond that had been formed between them was now solidified by their shared experiences and mutual respect. Emily and Lucy walked him to the door, their hearts full of warmth and appreciation. Before he left, John turned to them with a smile. "You've given me something far more valuable than I could ever give you," he said. "You've reminded me of what truly matters in life. Thank you." With that, he tipped his hat and made his way down the path, leaving behind a sense of connection and gratitude that would continue to influence both families in the years to come. As Lucy grew older, the events that had shaped her life remained etched in her memory, not just as moments of change, but as profound lessons in the power of kindness. She often found herself reflecting on the day she had helped John, a seemingly simple act that had rippled through her life, transforming it in ways she could have never imagined. It wasn't just the material changes, the new home, the better school, or even the newfound comfort. It was the realization that one small gesture could have such a monumental impact. This realization matured within her, shaping her values and guiding her actions as she navigated her teenage years. Lucy knew she had been given a rare gift, not just of financial stability, but of wisdom and perspective. She felt a deep responsibility to honor that gift, to ensure that the kindness she had received did not end with her. Inspired by John's example and by the many conversations they had shared, Lucy began to look for ways to give back. She didn't want to simply accept the good fortune that had come her way. She wanted to be a force for positive change in the lives of others, just as John had been for her. Her school offered many opportunities for involvement, and Lucy gravitated towards those that aligned with her growing sense of purpose. She started by joining a community service club, where students worked on various projects aimed at helping those in need. At first, Lucy participated in small ways, organizing food drives, collecting clothes for shelters, and visiting local nursing homes. But as time went on, she felt compelled to do more, to reach out to those who, like her younger self, were facing struggles they couldn't overcome alone. Lucy's thoughts often returned to the children she saw around her school, those who came from backgrounds similar to her own, before everything had changed. She recognized the quiet struggles in their eyes, the worry about things beyond their control, the uncertainty about the future. Lucy knew what it felt like to carry those burdens, and she wanted to help lighten their load. With a newfound determination, she began to focus her efforts on helping these children. She organized tutoring sessions, where she and other volunteers helped younger students with their studies, ensuring they didn't fall behind due to lack of resources or support. Lucy also worked on setting up mentorship programs, pairing students with older peers who could guide them, offer advice, and most importantly, listen to them. One of Lucy's most cherished projects was the creation of a scholarship fund, supported by fundraising events at the school and in the community. The fund was designed to help students from low-income families afford the school supplies, extracurricular activities, and educational opportunities that might otherwise be out of reach. Lucy worked tirelessly on this initiative, seeing it as a way to ensure that no child had to miss out on their potential due to financial hardship. Through these efforts, Lucy discovered a profound sense of fulfillment. Each time she saw a child's face light up with the joy of learning, or heard from a parent how much the support meant to them, she felt the impact of her work. It wasn't just about giving back, it was about creating a ripple effect of kindness that would continue to spread, just as John's generosity had done for her. Lucy's involvement in these projects not only benefited others, but also deepened her understanding of the world and her place in it. She realized that true wealth wasn't measured by money or possessions, but by the ability to make a difference in someone's life. And so, with each act of kindness, Lucy honored the legacy of the man who had changed her life, and in doing so, began to forge a legacy of her own. As the years passed, Lucy blossomed into a young woman who embodied the very ideals of kindness and compassion that had shaped her life. Her reputation in the town grew steadily, not because of the wealth she had inherited, but because of the way she used that wealth to uplift others. People spoke of Lucy with admiration and respect, recognizing in her a rare blend of humility, strength, and unwavering generosity. By the time she reached adulthood, Lucy had become a well-known figure in the community, not just as the girl who had once lived in poverty, but as someone who had dedicated her life to making the world a better place. Her story was one that inspired others, a testament to the idea that even the smallest acts of kindness could lead to extraordinary outcomes. Lucy's initiatives, which had started small, had grown over the years into significant programs that had a lasting impact on the town. The scholarship fund she had established continued to support countless students, helping them pursue their dreams just as she had been able to do. The mentorship and tutoring programs flourished, providing young people with the guidance and support they needed to navigate the challenges of growing up. But Lucy's influence went beyond the tangible programs she had created. She became a symbol of hope and resilience, someone who reminded others that their circumstances did not define them, and that with compassion and determination, they could overcome any obstacle. Her life story was shared at community events, in schools, and even in local media, touching the hearts of those who heard it. People from all walks of life sought Lucy's advice and support. She became a mentor to many, always willing to lend an ear or offer a helping hand. Her presence was a source of comfort and inspiration, and she carried herself with a quiet dignity that made her approachable to everyone, regardless of their background. Lucy's generosity was not limited to large-scale projects. She continued to engage in everyday acts of kindness that left a profound impact on those around her. Whether it was buying groceries for a struggling family, visiting the elderly in nursing homes, or simply offering words of encouragement to someone in need, Lucy never lost sight of the importance of the small gestures that had once changed her life. As her legacy grew, so did the number of people who were inspired to follow her example. Lucy's story became a beacon of light in the community, a reminder that compassion and kindness could transform lives in ways that money and material wealth never could. Her life was a living testament to the power of generosity, and the impact she had on others ensured that her legacy would continue to spread, touching lives far beyond the town where it all began. In Lucy's heart, she knew that the true measure of her life was not in the accolades or recognition she received, but in the positive change she was able to create in the world. She continued to live by the principles that had guided her since childhood, always striving to make a difference, one act of kindness at a time. The passing of John was a moment that rippled through the small town, casting a shadow of quiet sorrow over those who had known him. For Lucy, the news felt like the loss of a family member, someone who had not only changed her life, but had become an integral part of it. She had known this day would come, as John's health had been declining, but the reality of his absence was still a heavy burden on her heart. The day of John's funeral was one of somber reflection. The town gathered to pay their respects, filling the small church with the murmur of shared grief and memories. The service was simple, just as John would have wanted, focusing on the impact he had on those around him rather than on grand gestures. Lucy sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes fixed on the casket that held her dear friend. She thought about the countless conversations they had shared, the wisdom he had imparted, and the quiet strength he had shown even in his final days. After the funeral, as the crowd began to disperse, Lucy remained behind, standing alone by John's graveside. The cemetery was quiet, the only sound the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the peace of the place soothe her aching heart. When she finally turned to leave, she felt a deep resolve settle within her, an understanding that John's influence in her life was far from over. A few days later, as Lucy was going about her day at the cafe, a courier arrived with a package addressed to her. The sight of it caught her off guard, and for a moment she simply stared at it, a mix of curiosity and trepidation swirling within her. She knew instinctively that this was something from John. Taking the package to the back room, she sat down at a small table and carefully opened it. Inside was an envelope, thick and slightly worn, with her name written on the front in John's familiar, elegant handwriting. Beneath the envelope was a stack of documents tied with a ribbon. Lucy's fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the envelope and opened it, pulling out a letter that felt both heavy and precious in her hands. The letter began with John's characteristic straightforwardness, but as Lucy read on, the words seemed to take on a life of their own, speaking directly to her heart. John expressed his deep gratitude for the friendship they had shared, describing how her presence in his life had brought him a sense of purpose and joy that he had thought lost. He spoke of the importance of living a life rooted in kindness, of how Lucy's actions had reminded him of the values he had always cherished but sometimes lost sight of in the midst of his success. As she continued reading, Lucy discovered that the documents beneath the letter were related to a fund John had established in her name. It was substantial, far more than she had ever imagined, and it was intended for a single purpose: to continue the work she had begun, helping children and families who, like her, had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. John had seen in Lucy the potential to change lives, and he wanted to ensure that she had the means to do so on a larger scale. But it wasn't just the financial gift that moved Lucy. It was the trust John had placed in her, the belief that she would carry forward the legacy of compassion they had both come to value so deeply. In his letter, John wrote, "Lucy, you have shown me that the true wealth in this world is not found in the size of our bank accounts, but in the depth of our hearts. You have a heart full of riches, and I know you will use them wisely. This fund is not just a gift, it is a responsibility, one that I am confident you will honor with the same grace and integrity that have guided you thus far." As Lucy reached the end of the letter, she found herself overcome with emotion. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she realized the full extent of what John had done, not just for her, but for all the lives she would now have the opportunity to touch. His words were a final act of love, a way of ensuring that his influence would continue long after he was gone. Lucy sat quietly for a long time, the letter resting in her lap, her mind racing with thoughts of the future. She knew that this was a turning point, not just in her life, but in the lives of all those she would help through John's fund. The weight of the responsibility was heavy, but it was also a gift, a final lesson from the man who had taught her so much. Before leaving the room, Lucy folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. She tied the ribbon around the documents, securing them with a quiet promise to herself and to John's memory. She would honor his legacy, not out of obligation, but out of a deep sense of purpose and gratitude. She understood now more than ever that the greatest treasures in life were not material. They were the connections we make, the love we share, and the kindness we extend to others. With renewed determination, Lucy stepped back into the cafe, her heart filled with a quiet resolve. She knew that her path forward was clear: to use John's gift to spread the kindness and love that had changed her life, ensuring that his spirit lived on in every act of generosity she could offer. And in doing so, she would carry the legacy of their friendship into the future, one small act of kindness at a time.